You can't really change your genes, but you can change the way they are expressed. And you can modify your lifestyle based on certain aspects that your genes say.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kien, also known as Dr. B, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And on this podcast, I tell you how knowing about your genes can affect your health. Now, I write in my book, Thrive State, your DNA is not your destination. You could actually override whatever genes you were dealt with from mom and dad to improve your life by how you live your life. So Thrive State is all about knowing sleep, nutrition, movement, your stress and emotional mastery, knowing that your thoughts and mindset, your relationships, and the sense of purpose actually changes how your DNA is expressed. And again, that gene expression determines how cells perform. Now, why is it important to know what type of genes that you have? So it turns out we have these things called single nucleotide polymorphisms, also known as SNPs, which makes different little changes in our DNA. And depending on the SNPs that we actually have in our body, it can create a different protein. Now that protein could be better functioning, worse functioning, or have altered functioning. Now, if that was the case, that might change the way your cells actually behave and actually change your health. So knowing these SNPs ahead of time, you could actually have some actionable functional things that you can do. For example, there's a SNP in your body called the MTHFR gene, and that actually controls methylation in our bodies. Now, if you have a mutation in this gene or have a SNP in this gene that's a mutation, you might not be able to transfer methyl groups, and that actually changes your biochemistry. That could get some kids to be autistic. You can get people to actually have some cardiovascular disease. So what can you do if you know you have that SNP? Well, it turns out you could actually supplement with something called methyl B12 or methylfolate or methylated forms of B6 that actually corrects for this SNP in your body. And we have kids who are autistic reverse autism knowing that they've got that SNP. We got people who have brain fog or not functioning well in sports, reverse all that once they figure out they have that SNP. There are so many other different SNPs to discover, and that's what you're going to find out on today's episode. Now, before I introduce our guest, I want to ask you if this podcast has given you value. Now, if it has, please do us a favor and help us spread the word of this podcast by giving us 5 stars at ratethispodcast.com/ThriveState. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book, Thrive State, at ThriveStateBook.com. Leave us a review if it's changed your life. And also, if you want to do a little bit more work with myself and my team, we also have an online course called the Thrive State Accelerator. And because if you listen to this podcast, you get a special discount. Use the code podcast25 at kienvu.com/accelerator to receive 25% off the accelerator. Now, I'm going to introduce you to our next guest, which I actually met at a Boston BioLife conference. Boston BioLife is actually a conference where the latest technologies in the regenerative, longevity, and anti-aging space are. The faculty there are actually world-renowned faculty. They hold these conferences 4 times a year all across the country. And the person I'm bringing on today is actually one of the faculty members of Boston BioLife. His name is Dr. Chad Yarbrough. Dr. Chad Yarbrough was actually dealing with patients one-on-one, and he started to do some genetic tests with them. And what he found during the time when he was doing genetic tests were so many tests were actually not very private, that they actually sell your data to other companies. What he actually also found was a lot of these tests were super expensive, and a lot of these tests also lacked privacy. This is what led him to create MaxGen Labs. And he talks about how his tests have actually changed the lives and health of so many different people. He's a good friend of mine today. And please welcome to the Thrive State Podcast, Dr. Chad Yarbrough.
You can't really change your genes, but you can change the way they are expressed. And you can modify your lifestyle based on certain aspects of that your genes say. essentially. So, and there's in functional med and in just in general, there's 100 different things that you could focus on with the patient or, improving your life. But which one of those 100 is the most important? It narrows it down to it's actually achievable, instead of like working on detoxification, methylation, neurotransmitters, gut health, food sensitivities, all of these together, sleep, list goes on and on and on. So the DNA can actually, of course, it's all statistics. The thing, DNA is not your it's not your destiny, but it's not your destiny, but it is your tendencies. So it can tell us what tendencies you're going to have throughout your life. And, blood, I love blood work. I love organic acids testing. I love all of that. But, the thing with blood work is it is a snapshot in time. With genetics, it tells you what are you going to be prone for your entire life.
Right.
And what lab tests we need to focus on with you. What do we need to check? Most people check, a few things, but if it comes back negative, we may never check it again. But it might, the next time it might be positive, it might be high or low. Right. So I think, looking at genetics is really kind of a foundational thing with anybody. DNA is essentially like a recipe book. My mom has a recipe book that's got hundreds of recipes in it. DNA has thousands of genes coded in it. That is the recipe for making, proteins, for enzymes, neurotransmitters, all of these little things the chemical things that make us who we are and act the way we do. The instructions on how to make those are in your DNA. Yeah. So if, my mom makes great pumpkin pie. Fantastic. Now her apple pie, not so much, So,
I'm going to tell your mom.
Don't tell mom, sorry. But so some of us make really good proteins and enzymes, some of us not so much. So if we go to my mom's recipe for pumpkin pie, say maybe it's 1 cup sugar, and say we switch that to salt, that pie is not going to be that good. And that's the same thing with the single nucleotide polymorphism. The SNP is just a single, DNA is just basically a string of letters, A, C, T, G, G, T, C, whatever. Right. You swap one of those out, you just change the code that it codes for that protein. Right. And that's going to potentially change the way that enzyme or protein works. So when we change an enzyme or we change a protein like that structure, we change its function. So it may improve it or it may hinder it. And that's basically what a SNP is.
This episode of the Thrive State podcast is brought to you by the Thrive State Accelerator. The Thrive State Accelerator is actually a home course that I developed using the exact same techniques I work with my celebrity clients, CEOs, and executives on how to get them to the Thrive State. The Thrive State Accelerator teaches you how to master your 7 bioenergetic elements. That's sleep, nutrition, movement, stress and emotional mastery, relationships, our thoughts and mindset, as well as purpose. In this Thrive State Accelerator, you're also going to get a bonus module on optimization. That's how I talk about supplementation, peptides, all the optimization techniques I use with my clients to get them to the Thrive State. Now, for some of you who are just joining us for the first time, you guys might be wondering, what is the Thrive State? Well, the Thrive State is actually the energy, the epigenetic environment we give to ourselves, telling our DNA how to act and how to respond. And if we want optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, if we can master these 7 bioenergetic elements, our ability to have those 3 things that we just said, optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, is at its greatest. And it also prevents you from getting chronic symptoms like brain fog, being overweight, feeling sluggish, acne, pain, all these chronic symptoms, as well as preventing you from getting chronic disease. So getting to that Thrive State is really getting to that state to master being that very best version of yourself so you could show up for you, for your family, for your business, everything that's important to you. So go ahead, check it out right now at kienvu.com/accelerator and use coupon code podcast25 for 25% off. Now back to the podcast.
But what happens is we've got methyl groups that, that gets transferred in different protein systems in our body. And if you lack that enzyme, you can't transfer that methyl system around. And that kind of messes with people's biochemistry. In which case, if you have a problem with that gene, but you are able to supplement with methylated versions of B12, methylated versions of B6, and methylated versions of folate, all of a sudden you get a huge change in a person's physiology.
Correct.
Great. Now, you were mentioning just another gene before I stepped in there.
Oh, it's just a Tylenol. There's a CYP2E2, 2E1 that we see. Mm-hmm. We see a lot with them. And this is just kind of anecdotal in my experience with it. It has to do with Tylenol breakdown. It speeds it up into a very oxidative chemical called NAPQI. And it's extremely liver toxic. We see that a lot. And this is why you don't drink alcohol and take Tylenol. Tylenol absolutely trashes your liver, depletes glutathione, and oxidative stress is one of the root causes of all evil when it comes to health. And Tylenol is one of the worst to aggravate that, from chronic fatigue to you name it.
Right.
So that's a biggie. And I hate Tylenol, period. But in people who have that gene, you really need to stay away from it.
I'm just amazed at what you're sharing with us. Is the testing that you said that you helped your friend with so that he could get his build, and get his physique in order. How do people like us take advantage of this wonderful, program you have?
Well, we sell direct to consumer. I have around 800 or 900 physicians that use us around the world, but we do sell direct to consumer. And I feel that, the general public need access to this information in a safe manner and in an affordable manner. A lot of genetic testing, $400, $500, $1,000, $2,000 to get it done. I think we're coming in right around $200 to $300. And I think we have a discount code, Thrive15, for everybody on there. So if you want, it's 15% off. But we do sell direct to consumer. The report will come to you in a HIPAA secured link, and it should be pretty self-explanatory. It is a lot of information. It's about 30 pages, but take the time to sit, read through it. Get on Google, look up some things, take your time, and it'll eventually come together. And of course, like I said, you can do this at home. It's not a blood draw. It's a cheek swab. Mail it back into us. You can do it at home, non-invasive. You can do it on a baby. We have people doing I'll see two-day-old kids coming in wow, So it's something that anybody can do, direct to consumer. You need help looking at it, or need a little more help with a physician. It's not hard to find anybody at all. So it's pretty easy to get this kind of data.
Dr. Yarbrough, you've done chiropractic, you've been in the genetic space, you've seen so much anti-aging regenerative medicine when you go out to conferences. But for you, what has been your best medicine?
My best medicine for me, sleep. I do not sleep well, but like I said earlier, when I get a good night's sleep, I'm unstoppable. And I think that's my biggest thing with me is sleep. And I don't think enough of us get it.
I hope you enjoyed those highlights from this week's Thrive State podcast. To hear the full episode of the podcast, you can listen at Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are heard. Now, if you're enjoying the content, please help this podcast grow by leaving us a review at ratethispodcast.com/Thrive State. Also, if you really want to get into the Thrive State, people ask me, where do I start or how do I get deeper? Well, here are a few resources for you. Number one, you can pick up 3 free chapters of my book at thrivestatebook.com. In addition, if you want to go a little bit deeper, get to meet myself and my team and get some online coaching, we have an online course called the Thrive State Accelerator. It's the same material I go through to get my clients into the Thrive State. Go to kienbu.com/accelerator and use the coupon code podcast25 to receive 25% off. And yes, I am a concierge physician at the VU MD Performance and Longevity Clinic. I have a very small concierge practice, but if you or somebody you know may want to be a client, consider applying at kienbu.com/VUUMD. And until next time, remember always, always, always that you are your best medicine.